We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. You don't marry someone expecting to spend your nights lying awake, running through every little inconsistency in their stories. But that was my reality. There were signs that my wife, Kara, was having an affair outside. She always had somewhere to be. Errands that took way longer than they should, late-night grocery runs for items we didn't even need, sudden meetups with friends I'd never heard of before. And every time I asked about it, she had an answer ready. Always calm, always reasonable. But when someone has an excuse for everything, that's when you start realizing the truth isn't in what they say, it's in what they refuse to say. The biggest red flag was her phone. It was always in her hand or face down on the table, locked tight with a password I wasn't allowed to know. If she left it unattended for even a second, she'd rush back to grab it like it was a ticking time bomb. She never let me borrow it, not even for something simple like checking the weather or making a quick call. And the weirdest part? She deleted everything, every message, every call log, even our own conversations. Who does that? What kind of married woman needs to wipe her phone clean every single day? I wasn't stupid. I knew something was going on. But knowing and proving are two different things. I thought about hiring a private investigator, but let's be real. Those guys cost money, and we weren't exactly swimming in cash. If I wanted answers, I had to find them myself. So I started watching her more closely, looking for patterns, inconsistencies, anything that could confirm what I already suspected in my gut. But she was good. It felt like I was chasing shadows. Kara's secret later gets exposed in the worst way possible. One evening, one of my friends sent me a link and asked me to check what he just saw. I clicked the link he sent, and my stomach dropped. It was a short 20 seconds of my wife, Kara, in an intimate session, naked and moaning, wrapped around another man. At first, I refused to believe it. I later understood that her secret lover must have posted it by mistake on Snapchat. I felt that karma, just decided it was time. Within minutes, the video spread beyond Snapchat, jumping to leak sites, gossip forums, and even Twitter. Strangers were reposting it, dissecting it, and making jokes about it. And the worst part? Some of my own friends had already seen it before I did. I confronted Kara immediately. She was still in denial, still pretending that she had no idea what I was talking about. I held up my phone, showing her the evidence, and waited. For a moment, she just stared, eyes wide, lips trembling. Then she scoffed and shook her head. "It's Photoshop," she said. "It's fake. Someone is trying to ruin us." I almost laughed. Even now, with the entire world watching, she still thought she could lie her way out of this. Photoshop. I repeated, my voice eerily calm. "Kara, it's a video." She had no answer for that. She just kept shaking her head, scrambling for excuses. But no amount of lying could change that. I made my decision. In the middle of the chaos, while Kara was still trying to do damage control, I had already contacted a lawyer. I filed for divorce immediately, citing infidelity, which she funded with our joint money. She tried to talk to me that night, tried to plead, but I wasn't listening. In my mind, she had already become a stranger. Whatever love I had left for her had died the moment I saw that video. The woman I married was gone, and all that was left was someone I didn't recognize. As I began the divorce process, there was one last question eating me alive. The child I had been raising for 2 years, was he even mine? I didn't want to believe that Kara could betray me on every level. But the way things were going, I couldn't trust anything anymore. I kept my suspicions to myself, while secretly taking the steps to get the test done. I collected a few strands of Miles' hair from his baby brush and submitted my sample. Then I waited. The day the results arrived, I had no idea what to expect. I opened it to see probability of paternity, 0%. I read it again, my brain refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. Had she known all along? Does it even matter? The damage was done. My marriage was dead, and now even the one thing I held on to was gone too. By the time we got to court, I was no longer interested in hearing anything Kara had to say. I presented the DNA test results along with the leaked video as evidence of her infidelity. I wanted the court to see what kind of woman I had been married to. When the judge looked at me, I could see that he understood. He has seen this kind of case before, or maybe the sheer devastation in my eyes said everything I couldn't. Either way, he finalized the divorce, and with that I was legally free from Kara. But Kara? She was furious. She hated what she got in the settlement, but I couldn't care less. She could have taken everything, and I still wouldn't have stayed. At that point, money, property, and assets didn't mean a thing to me. I had lost something far greater, the life I thought I had. And so, without another word to her, I walked out of that courtroom, determined never to look back. After the divorce, I couldn't stay in that city. Everywhere I turned, there was a reminder of what Kara had done. I knew if I stayed, it would eat me alive. I didn't want pity, and I didn't want people telling me to heal or forgive. I wanted distance. So, I did the only thing that made sense. I left. I cut off every single person connected to Kara, her friends, her family, even mutual acquaintances. If they knew her, they would never hear from me again. I deleted my social media, changed my number, and packed up what little I cared to take with me. I didn't leave a forwarding address. As far as that version of me was concerned, I was dead. Starting over wasn't as freeing as people like to make it sound. I moved to a different state, one where no one knew my name, no one knew my past, and no one had ever heard of the scandal that destroyed my life. At first, I thought the change of scenery would help. But pain doesn't just disappear because you're somewhere else. It follows you, sits in the quiet spaces between your thoughts, and reminds you of everything you lost when you least expect it. I tried to distract myself. I picked up hobbies, things I never had time for when I was married, woodworking, hiking, even learning to cook something other than instant noodles. I forced myself to make small talk with neighbors, to say yes when invited for a beer, to pretend I was a normal guy, just living his life. I even made a few friends. But no matter how much I tried to move forward, there was a part of me that was still frozen in the past. Love? That was off the table. I didn't trust myself anymore. I had given my heart to a woman who burned it to ashes, and I wasn't about to hand the pieces to someone else. Every time I even thought about dating, a voice in my head reminded me how stupid I had been before. So I convinced myself that this was enough, this half-life, this careful existence, where I never let anyone get too close. It was lonely, but at least it was safe. And after what I had been through, safe was all I could handle. Everything changed when a new neighbor moved in. When I first saw her, I didn't think much of it. I had lived in this neighborhood for years now, keeping mostly to myself. I wasn't the type to go knocking on doors with a welcome basket. But as fate would have it, we kept running into each other. First, at the mailbox. Then, at the grocery store. Then one day, when she locked herself out of her house, she knocked on my door, asking to use my phone. That was the first time I looked at her. She had a sadness in her eyes, one I recognized because I had seen it in the mirror for years. Her name was Elaine. She had lost her husband in a car accident a few years back. She didn't go into details at first, and I didn't push. But over time, as our casual conversations turned into longer talks over coffee, I learned that she had been through a kind of pain that never fully goes away. And somehow, that made it easier for me to open up, too. For the first time since my divorce, I spoke about the betrayal that had nearly destroyed me, the son I thought was mine but wasn't, the life I ran away from. She didn't judge, she didn't pity me, she just listened. And in her presence, I felt peace. We didn't rush into anything. Neither of us was looking for love, and maybe that's why it happened so naturally. We started spending more time together, watching movies, taking walks, just talking. And after years of feeling like love was a trap, I finally let myself believe that it didn't have to be. When we finally became more than friends, it was quiet, steady, and real. As the years passed, we built a life together. And then we had a daughter that changed everything. The moment I held her, I knew she was my second chance. A chance to be the father I had once wanted to be. With Elaine and our daughter, I felt something I hadn't in almost 2 decades. I felt whole. One morning, my wife and daughter were away visiting her family, leaving me alone in the house. I had no plans for the day, just a cup of coffee and the silence that I had come to appreciate over the years. Then came the knock. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I didn't think much of it as I walked to the door. The moment I swung it open, my breath caught in my throat. Standing before me was a young man, no older than 20. His posture was tense, his expression unreadable. But that wasn't what froze me in place. It was his face. It was like staring into a mirror of my younger self. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then, in a voice that was steady, but held a trace of emotion beneath it, the young man spoke. "Hello, sir. I'm Miles. I've been looking for you." Miles? My mind scrambled for a connection, but the only Miles I had ever known was, no. That wasn't possible. My instincts were directing me to shut the door. But my curiosity, or maybe something deeper, stopped me. Without a word, I stepped aside and let him in. Inside, I moved mechanically, pouring him a cup of coffee while my mind raced. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, watching me. I had spent nearly 2 decades burying my past, and now, in the span of minutes, it had come knocking on my door. And worse, it had my face. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I didn't know what to say, so I waited for him to speak first. "I've been looking for you for years," Miles said, his fingers gripping the coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. "Every penny I made, I put it into searching for you." I frowned, confused. "Why?" His eyes met mine. "Because you're my father." I laughed. "No, I'm not," I said, shaking my head. "I saw the DNA test. I made peace with that years ago." Miles didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a folder. He slid it across the table, his eyes locked onto mine. "Then read this." Reluctantly, I opened the folder. What I saw made my stomach drop. The first document was a medical report from when Miles was 5 years old. He had needed an emergency blood transfusion. But there had been a problem. His blood type didn't match the man he had been calling Dad. Confused, the doctors had ordered a DNA test. The results? The man wasn't his father. I flipped through more pages. As he grew older, Miles had done multiple DNA tests, trying to make sense of it all. Each one confirmed the same thing. I was his biological father. I stared at the papers, my vision blurring. This couldn't be real. It couldn't. But the proof was right there in my hands. "I don't believe this," I muttered, pushing the papers away. "You can leave now," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Miles stayed still, locking eyes with me. Then he said, "Please, don't leave me again like you did 18 years ago." I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him to walk out that door and never come back. But something about him made me pause. "Fine," I said, my voice hollow. "One last test. But if it says you're not mine, I don't want to see you ever again." Miles nodded, his expression unreadable. "Deal." The next morning, we went to the best lab in the city. There should be no room for doubt. I watched as they collected our samples. The results were ready the next day. I opened the envelope when I got it. My eyes scanned the paper. The words blurred together for a second before snapping into focus. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. The paper slipped from my hands. I had abandoned my own son for 18 years. I looked up at Miles, my vision swimming. He was watching me, waiting, hoping. And for the first time since I left my old life behind, I felt my walls collapse. I sat across from Miles, staring at the young man I had unknowingly abandoned for 18 years. I can't even explain how I feel. The silence between us stretched, heavy with everything left unsaid. I wanted to speak, to say something that could fix what I had done. But where do you even begin when you failed someone in the worst way possible? Miles didn't rush me. He just sat there. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, but I could hear the weight behind it. He told me about the man he had called Dad his whole life. That man never married Kara, never truly claimed him as a son. He was distant. He was there, physically, but never in the way a father should be. There were no words of encouragement, just rules, disappointment, and a constant reminder that Miles was more of a burden than a blessing. Hearing it made my stomach twist. I had convinced myself that walking away was the best thing to do back then. I thought I was leaving behind a child who already had a father, a life that didn't include me. But the truth? The truth was that I had left my own flesh and blood to fend for himself in a house that never truly felt like home. Then he said something that I wasn't expecting. Kara had regretted everything. She regretted pushing me away, regretted the affair, regretted the man she had chosen over me. And as Miles got older, she told him the truth. She told him about me, about the mistake with the DNA test, about how I had left without knowing the real story. He had spent years trying to find me, hoping I would want him back. Before I even realized it, my face was wet. I had sworn I wouldn't cry, but the guilt was too much. My voice broke as I finally spoke. I abandoned you when you needed me the most, I said. I failed you. I'm so sorry. I wasn't just apologizing for leaving. I was apologizing for every birthday I missed, for every time he wondered why his real father never came looking for him, for every second he had to live thinking he wasn't wanted. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then, he let out a breath and gave me a small nod. I was angry for a long time, he admitted. But I didn't come here just to be angry. I came here because I needed my father. He wasn't just looking for a man from his past. He was looking for the father he had never truly had. And for the first time in 18 years, I realized I still had the chance to be that man. Making up for 18 years wouldn't happen overnight, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to waste another second. I wanted Miles to know he wasn't alone anymore. He had a place in my life, and more importantly, in my family. The first step was introducing him to my daughter, his half-sister. She had grown up with a kind of love and security that he had been denied, and I knew this meeting would be emotional for both of them. When they finally stood face to face, she hugged him, a simple, silent gesture that said, "Welcome." Then came my wife, Miles' stepmother. She had known my past, known the pain I carried, but meeting Miles made everything real. She welcomed him with kindness, with warmth, with a quiet understanding of someone who knew what it meant to lose and to heal. As the days turned into weeks, we slowly started building something new. We weren't the perfect family, and we never would be. The years lost could never be rewritten, but they didn't have to define us either. What mattered was the future, and for the first time in a long time, I had hoped that we could create one together. I couldn't undo the past. I couldn't give Miles back the childhood he deserved, but I could give him something else, a father who would never walk away again. Looking back, I realize how easy it is to let pain control your decisions. When my wife betrayed me, I didn't just leave her, I left everything, because I wanted nothing to do with the mess she created. At the time, it felt like the only way to survive. I thought disappearing would help me heal, that cutting off all connections would erase the pain. But pain doesn't work that way. For 18 years, I convinced myself that I had done the right thing. After all, I had proof that the boy I had been raising wasn't mine. And yet I was wrong. I made a decision based on what I thought was the truth, but the truth had layers I never uncovered. The DNA test at the time told me one thing, but life had a cruel way of showing me that even proof can be flawed. Because of that one mistake, I lost nearly 2 decades with my real son. I missed his childhood, his birthdays, his struggles, his joys. I missed it all. And the worst part? I can't get that time back. I tell you this story not for sympathy, but as a warning. Pain can blind us. When we're hurt, all we want to do is run, to escape, to forget, to start over somewhere else. But in trying to protect ourselves, we might be creating bigger wounds, ones that don't just affect us, but the people who love us, the people who need us. If I had stayed, if I had dug deeper, instead of letting my emotions drive me away, I could have known the truth sooner. I wouldn't have left my son to grow up thinking I had abandoned him. So if there's one thing you take from this, let it be this. Always seek the full truth before making life-altering decisions. Don't react based on anger, hurt, or betrayal. Look at everything. Ask questions. Verify, even when you think you already have the answers. Because sometimes, what we believe to be true is only part of the story. Now, I have a second chance. It won't erase the past, but it gives me a future with my son. And this time, I